You guys hear those planes? They go over this place every few minutes. But today, it's payback. You'll see. Hey, how's it going, do-it-yourselfers? Welcome to yet another video on the Dream Garage build. So my contractor is about to get here and he's gonna start on digging out the footings again for this slab, putting in the base, and then putting out the lumber or the forms for the concrete. Then in another day, he'll come and do the rebar, all the metal work as well. But in just one video, we're going to cover everything. And by everything, I mean everything in one video. So not just the concrete work and the foundation work, but also installing the building, putting up the posts, the roof trusses, putting them together, installing the sheeting on the sides and on the roof, putting the trim piece and everything. Yeah, all of it is going to be on time lapse with narrations by me as to what's going on. But first, I got some leftover spray paint and a drone, and I feel on the artistic side this morning. So I'm actually going to draw out some abstract art on this, get you guys a shot of this drone as well. I am an artiste. The spray can is my brush, and this concrete pad is my canvas. All right, let's get you guys a shot of this masterpiece. Yep, there you go. Maybe not so abstract after all, huh? Yep, you leave me with some spray can and a drone, art happens. All right, folks, so as you can see, all the rebar is in, all the forms, all the stakes are in, and we're ready to go. But the good news is actually the inspector was here earlier and he approved all of this. So we're ready for pour day, which is actually tomorrow. But before I cut to that, I'm gonna go over a couple of very important tips that you should know about if you're gonna be building a garage, especially if you're gonna be getting a VersaTube, and especially if you're gonna be putting a car lift in there. All right, so as you can see, the rebar is spaced 18 inches on center. Both ways. I mean 18 inches on center, you get a rebar this way and this way as well. As far as the size of the rebar, this is number 4, or in other words, 1/2 inch rebar. Now you can probably get away with 3/8 inch rebar and also putting it at 24 inch on center, but you know, I decided to be on the safe side and spend a little bit more money and get the 1/2 inch and 18 on center. Now next, if you're going to be getting a VersaTube building, you're going to have an option for putting a sheeting ledge on the slab. Now the sheeting ledge is basically a 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch space at the lip of your slab. So this is our slab. It would normally go to this board, but since I put this board in here, this 2x2, which in other words is really 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch. So this is going to be, space is going to be empty. So when the base rail comes, it's going to go here, and then our sheeting is going to be attached to on this side, on the long side of the building, and the bottom of the sheeting is going to go sit down just above this empty space here. That's going to be at the tip of our slab. In other words, when the sheeting comes down here and your slab is here and then there's a drop off here, the sheeting sits there. That way when water hits your sheeting and comes down here, it collects at the bottom and then goes away and not into the building. So yeah, you want to get a 2x2 and put it all around the top board on the inside of the form. Also, if you're going to be bringing power to your workshop, you want to put a grounding rod right at the corner where your sub panel is or your panel is, and then you attach that to all the other rebar, and that way, you know, this provides a very good ground just in case if there's a problem with electrical problem, there's a short or something, you don't get electrocuted and power travels through that to the concrete and all the other rebars. Next, if you know about where your car lift is going to go, you want to dig down a little deeper. As you can see, I dug down 2 footings, one here, one there, I'm going to give you guys a closer shot to see exactly how much I dug down. Now, if I had a tape measure here, if you measure it, this area for the footing, this is about 9 to 10 inches deep. Same goes for that side. Now, a minimum requirement for as far as having concrete for a car lift is usually about 4 inches. So, 9, 10 inches is way overkill. But hey, better safe than sorry. Also, if you have some, you want to put rebar at the bottom. You don't want to put rebar where it's resting on the ground, obviously. You want to raise it up a few inches. This is what I used to raise it up a few inches. My contractor had these. That goes for all the rebar, of course. None of the rebar should be touching the ground. Now, as far as what kind of car lift I'm going to get, I'm still deciding. Maybe a rotary, maybe a Mohawk. Those are pretty expensive though. So I'm actually go with a bent pack or an Atlas. I have to do more research. If you know a good car lift for a good reasonable price, leave a comment down below. But as far as this video, so next we're going to cut to tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. when the concrete guys are going to be here. I'm going to show you how they pour the concrete. So as you can see, the concrete is all poured in. The finishing work is done. We went with a smooth finish. We also got some control joints that I'm going to talk about in a minute in the pad as well. So minus a few things, all the foundation work is pretty much done. So yeah, as I mentioned, I decided to go with a smooth finish on the surface of the concrete slab because obviously if you're building a garage, you're going to be working on cars, you're going to have oil spills and whatnot. So having a smooth surface helps cleaning that up much easier. Also, I decided to go with control joints. I was thinking not putting them in, but talking to all the different contractors, it doesn't matter what you do. If you're pouring a concrete slab, you're gonna have cracks. And if you don't have these control joints that I'm gonna show you in a bit, that crack can potentially run right across your concrete slab from one end to the other. But if you have those control joints, the crack is gonna hit that joint and it's just gonna follow that joint wherever it is at the bottom of that joint, and it's gonna be hidden. All right, so after concrete pour, it's also a very good idea to try to keep the surface wet because you don't want the concrete to dry out too quickly at the surface, especially, and develop hairline cracks up top. All right, it's erection time. Building erection, that is. That's what they call it. And we're gonna move through these quickly. You guys can see me install the posts right now. Then came the horizontal pieces called head channels, which go between the posts. And you want to make sure especially the posts are nice, level, and plumb, because if they're not, everything is going to be crooked. And once you get to the roof or the roof trusses, everything is going to be really crooked. Now you see me over here remove the post from that end of the building, and I had to move the railing back a little bit because we ran into a bit of a premature building erection dysfunction. But everything went back up quickly, and I did not have to call a doctor. Alright, so starting with the roof trusses, I was able to get some help from a good friend of mine. You guys can probably see us on the screen right now, putting the trusses together on one end of the building and then stacking them up on top of each other as well. Alright, next it came time to install the trusses. For this I rented an equipment called a telehandler forklift. You can obviously rent a crane as well, but for my application this worked better. And this one cost a lot of money. It was for $1,000 a day. Including delivery and pickup, but we got everything done. We had 11 trusses to install, but you want to do your own study and make sure that you get the right one that can have the right reach and height for your application. Also, this was a good option for me because as you can see, this equipment can do the crab crawl, which is basically being able to turn the 4 wheels in one direction at the same time and crawl sideways. That way you can line things up and install the trusses a lot easier. Alright, so over here you can see me install the header for the garage door. And obviously the trusses that go above the garage door on one end of them, the part that extends out is going to be shorter than the other end since it has to go into the garage door and not one of the posts on the side. So if you're doing a Versatube building, you want to keep that in mind. Also, I don't know if I mentioned that, but there's a total of 11 trusses for this building. The trusses at the two ends, they don't have the webbing on the inside, but you know, overall this wasn't that hard to do. You want to make sure you measure everything. The distance between the posts or the bottom piece on the trusses equals exactly 40 feet or whatever the width of your building is, so that you can install them correctly and nothing will be out of alignment. So after getting all the trusses in, we started installing the rest of the head channels. Now there's 4 rows of head channels on the sides for my application. There's one at the bottom, 2 towards the center, and 1 up top. I obviously only installed the one at the bottom and then one above it before I installed the roof trusses, so that if I had to do any adjustment for the roof trusses, it could have been done easier. But you know, obviously you want to make sure everything is, all the posts especially, are plumb and to balance, otherwise everything is going to be out of whack. But again, this is not a video, it's going to be a step-by-step installation of a Versatube building. This is just to give you a very general idea of what installing one of these buildings entails. Alright, so after installing all the head channels, it came time to start installing our sheeting. Now I'm also installing some reflective insulation that you can see right now. Now they come in 4 foot wide pieces, but we decided to tape 2 of them together on the ground and use 8 foot wide pieces and install them before putting out the sheeting, because that was just easier instead of trying to tape them together while they're hanging on the side of the roof, especially if you're doing this on a windy day. Now, one thing I should mention, that if you're going to be installing sheeting on a windy day, you really need to be careful. Now, these are not super heavy. They're only 29 gauge sheeting, but you know, if you're doing this on a windy day, now the sidewalls, you know, they're not that bad. They're only 13 feet high, so I didn't struggle with those. But the sheeting that goes on the ends of the building towards the middle were as high as 18 feet high, and then the sheeting that goes on the roof were 21 feet long, I should say. Now, I actually ended up dropping 1 or 2 of them. You guys gonna see that later on in this video. But yeah, just you know, take precautions and be very careful if you're gonna be installing these on a windy day. Now, one thing that helped greatly while installing the insulation was using some double-sided tape. You'll see it better later in the video, but as you can see, it's quite windy while we were installing it, and you know, it was knocking the insulation around. It was hard to keep it in place to go get the sheeting and put it on. So you know, we put some double-sided tape on the bottom, a little bit towards one of the center rails, and then some on top. We also used some packaging tape as well, just to keep it help keep it in place. Here from this shot you can probably see it better at the bottom. You can see the red tape, that's part of the double-sided tape at the bottom. Then I had some towards the center and up top as well. You know, we roll down the insulation, attach it to where the double-sided tape was, and you know, that would hold them in place. We'll go get the sheeting, put them up, screw them in, and be all done. I think this is where I dropped one of these sheetings. As you can see, the wind has picked up and I'm struggling with it a little bit. It looks worse than it is because, you know, it's on a time lapse. But it was still pretty bad and I dropped it. It didn't get dinged up that bad, luckily, but you know, then I got it up again, banged it around a little bit more. It was still okay. I was finally able to put it up there and you know, put in a couple of screws, and then those would hold it in place. And now it's time for the fun part, installing the sheeting for the roof. First came the insulation, obviously. Double-sided tape came in real handy for that. And as you can see, what we did was, you know, we put the sheeting up, we rested against the edge, and I went inside and clamped the scaffolding. Got a hand onto it. Again, these are not heavy, but these were pretty long. So, you know, I pulled, my friend pushed, I laid it flat on top, and then slide it up towards the center. And then put on the next piece of sheeting. And you know, we kept going. But after we were able to put up a couple of these sheetings on the roof, I was able to go stand on the sheeting, you know, and run the rest of the screws in. So that would made it easier. Now, one thing I should make a note of is that we installed this during the heat wave in July, which was a terrible idea because, as I'm sure some of you have experienced or know, that you know, when you do roofing in the summer, it gets really hot. Now, when you do roofing and your roofing material is sheet metal, it gets even hotter. But what's even worse is that if you're installing reflective insulation. So while I was up there, that insulation reflected the sunlight right onto my face. You know, it was 100 degrees out, but on my face it was 120, 130. It was bad, but I had no choice. We had to do it, you know, because it wasn't going to get any cooler. So we just kept on going. I was drinking a lot of water, maybe 2-3 gallons a day. But you know, we had no choice. We just had to simply toughen it out. Next, it was time to install the sheeting for the roof on the other side. Now, it was more difficult on the other side because, as you can see, there's a drop off on that side, and also the wind again. And this is where we dropped the second one. You can see both of us trying to put it up. We got it up there, but when we went to turn it and put it against the building, the wind picked up and knocked it out of our hand. And this one got dinged up a little bit, as you might be able to tell in the video. But you know, once it was installed and put up there, you really couldn't see. You had to stand on top of the roof to see where it got dinged up, luckily. But again, you know, take precautions if you're doing this in the summer. First, don't. Second, if you really have to, then you know, you want to make sure that you take all the safety measures that you can possibly take, especially if it's windy out. Alright, so after installing the sheathing for the roof, it came time to install the trim pieces on the sides and also the trim piece at the peak between the sheathing that's on the roof as well. Now, there isn't much to this. You just measure and cut them, and then you install them using the self-drilling screws. And now, one thing is very important is that you want to make sure you wear a harness, because if you're doing this on a taller building like I was, You know, putting the screws on top, it's not that difficult for the trim pieces, but then you have to screw it on the sides as well, and you have to lean forward and off the side of the building, and that's where it can get tricky. So make sure you wear a safety harness and you know, take your time and stay safe. But once that was done, the building was done, and I could barely contain myself, and I just had to do my signature dance move.